In this video, we're going to look at the second set of writing problems for loops. This is number 2. And these are the word problems. They're going to be a little bit more challenging than the basic problems. So make sure you've completed all of the basic problems or looked at the solutions and watched the videos, but at some point you've worked through all of those on your own. Hopefully you can understand them and now you're in a position to write them yourself before tackling these, because these will be more challenging. So I'm going to get started on this by creating a new program in my sandbox. I'm going to call it Loops 2, since this is the second writing problem. And I'm going to put some comments here, as is the best practice. So writing Loops 2. I'm going to put my author name. Okay. And I've got 3 problems that I'm working on here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put place markers for them so I kind of can orient myself. So this says to use the range function, print the multiples of 5, from 10, multiples of 5 from 10 through, up through and including 25. So if I just go 1 over 25, that'll work. And I want to do multiples of 5 each time, okay. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the for I in range bit. The number should be separated by a space. So I'm going to print I, and then I know that I need to, instead of putting them on new lines, I'm going to put spaces in between them. Yes. And I also am going to need, it says don't forget to print a new line after this loop by calling print with no parameters. Good, and so that's going to help me space things out. And as is the best programming practice, I want to write my code and then immediately test it to make sure it does what I expect. Okay, so I can't use my green play button up here because it's trying to run the loops 1. But if I click on my file and then right click on it and go to run loops 2, ta-da, I can see the multiples of 5 from 10 through 25 inclusive. Yay, separated by spaces. Let's go to the next one. I'm going to use the range function again. So I'm going to go ahead for I in range. Multiples of 3 from -3 to 21. So if I just add one more to my last one that I want, 22, that works. And I'm going up by 3 each time because these are multiples of 3. Each number should be separated by a comma. Okay, again, I'm going to have to use end here to separate them by a comma and a space. There should not be a comma after the final number. So no comma after 21. I don't have that handled yet. So what I'd like to do is test, and I'm going to put my print there. I want to test this out and see how close I am to my goal. So I save it, I run it. I can now use the play button up here because it says loops 2, which is the program I'm trying to run. Okay. So I've got a bunch of numbers, multiples of 3 from -3 up through 21 with commas after them. But I don't want a comma after the last number. Well, there's a couple different ways of doing this. If you have experience working with an if statement, you could throw one in here, although that's not the most efficient solution, but it is a solution. The simplest way I know is to isolate the number that we're handling differently. All the numbers, we want to print the number followed by comma and space. This is true of all the numbers except which one? The last, 21. 21 is the only one that we want to handle differently. So what if we just handled 21 differently? One way to do that is to reduce my range so that only the statements that are repeating are the ones that are all the same. But then I still need to print out 21, and so one option would be to print it out at the very end. Let's see if this works. Why, yes, it does. How nice. So do you see what I did there? I isolated which numbers are all the same. -3 through 18 are actually all the same, and 21 is different because 21 is not followed by a comma space. So I isolated that number and handled it separately. You might also be able, if you wanted to do it in a more programmatic way, instead of using 21, the literal, you could also say I plus 3, for example, would work. Let me play that one. and that also works. Any of these will meet the requirements stated of the problem. As long as your program outputs and meets all the specifications laid out in the question, it's fully correct, even if it's not the way I would do it, or if it's not a way I've shown you. If it's correct and it gets the output, that's all. That's what matters here. Okay. Finally, I'm going to create a program, average.py. Ooh, so average.py technically should be created in a separate window. I'm going to just make a note that it should be average.py. I'm not actually turning this in, so it doesn't matter for my purposes if I create a separate program, and I'd prefer to keep all of these answers, all of these problems together. However, if I was asking you to submit the results of this assignment as a homework, quiz, or a midterm, then for full credit, you would need to create an average.py as a separate file. Okay, so I'm going to create a program, or in this case, a snippet of code, average.py, that calculates and prints the average of 10 real decimal numbers. Okay, so decimal numbers indicates floats to me, entered by the user. They're going to be 10 numbers. So I'm going to ask the user to enter 10 numbers. And I'm going to prompt the user to enter each number. Okay, so let's just do some basic code for I in range 10. I want to get some input. Num equals input. Please enter a real number. And again, I'm putting a space after my, within my prompt. Oh, for I in range. Haha. Num equals input. Please enter a real number. Okay, I'm not going to run it this time because I don't want to enter in 10 numbers. But I highly recommend that you do so. If you want to test it with fewer numbers, you can also remove the 0 just to see what happens. Okay, so it asked me for a number. But do you remember what type of data input gets? Input gets a string. And this says I need to get real numbers. And I'm also going to be performing arithmetic on them. So I definitely need numbers. I could put an eval. That's one way of doing it. Don't forget the parentheses at the end. I could put an eval. That's going to give me an integer or a float, depending on what the user enters. But I really think I want floats this whole time. It's not incorrect to use eval, but because the emphasis in the question is on real decimal numbers, I'm going to go ahead and make these floats. But now what do I do with it? So I'm going to repeat prompting the user for a number 10 times. But I don't want to lose that number. I don't even want to just print it, right? I could just simply print my number. That's what we've been doing before. But that's not really what I want to do now. So let's keep working. We're trying to print the average. Well, I don't have anything to be the average right now. So maybe that's something that I need to repeat. Maybe one of the things I'm doing is creating this average. So what two components go into an average? An average is the sum of the numbers divided by, so we've got the sum divided by the total number of numbers. How many numbers am I getting as input? Well, it's supposed to be 10, right? That's what we have up here. So I'm doing for I in range 10, and then I'm dividing by 10. Okay, well that should work. But what's this sum? What should this sum be? Well, the sum, I want to take each of these numbers that I've input, the user's input, and I want to add them together. So this is where the repetition in the for loop changes a little bit than what you might do by hand. By hand, you would just say num plus num plus num plus num. But we can't do that in source code because we have to isolate. We have to isolate our operations into a single step, right? So what we're actually doing when we add, let's say we're going to add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. What we're actually doing is we're actually taking, let's say we started with we've already got 1 there. We're taking 1 plus 2 equals 3. So we're taking the previous sum, the previous addition, and then we're adding 3 to it. We're getting 6, and then we're adding 4 to it, and we're getting 10. So in essence, this is actually slightly more in sync and more aligned with what we're actually doing in the for loop. With the for loop, we want to take whatever the sum is, and we want to add num to it. We want to take the number that we get in, and we want to keep a running sum, a running total. And remember, this plus equals shorthand is the same as saying sum equals the previous version of sum plus num. Now let's see if I can run this. Let's see what happens. I have an error. Type error, unsupported operand, types plus equals, built-in function or method in float. Okay. Well, sum is a built-in method. Let's try S. I'll try S here. Let's see. Oh, but now we have an error. Unresolved references. What does it say? Okay, I don't quite know what it's saying there. Let's just try and run it and see what happens. Oh, this is a more useful error. This is a more useful error. S plus equals num. Name S is not defined. Okay, and let me just make sure I update those two so it's consistent. S is not defined. Do you remember how we said that any variable that we use on the right-hand side of an equal sign must first be on the left? Well, when we evaluate S plus equals num, remember it looks very similar to this. S plus num is evaluated before the assignment is pushed into S. Therefore, the first time the loop executes, S doesn't have a value. It's showing up on the right-hand side of an equal before we've assigned it to the left. So our solution to that is to initialize it up top, before the loop, at the top of the program. This is known as an aggregator variable. This variable must be initialized. So aggregator variables must be initialized before the loop. And so S is going to be used to aggregate the sum of the numbers within the loop. Okay, so if we're creating a sum, what number should we initialize S to be? If S is going to be a sum, should I initialize it to be 1? Well, no, because then I'm going to add 1 to all the numbers the user enters, and I'm going to be off by 1. So when I'm adding things together, a good neutral value that won't affect the computation is 0. What if I were multiplying? If I was multiplying, perhaps 1 would be a good value to start with, if I was multiplying all my values together. Because 1 is neutral in terms of multiplication, it doesn't change the output. 0 would not be good, because then no matter what I multiplied together, no matter what the user entered in the loop, I would be multiplying everything by 0, and so I would always get 0. Okay, so let's try this out and see where we get. It is running. Now I want to enter some numbers so that I know what the average will be. Can you tell me what the average is going to be? It should be 3, right? Good, average 3.0, and look, it is a real number, right? It's a float, it's a whole number. Awesome. So there you have it.